Thank you very much. Ground temperature monitoring is something that the GNWT has just begun. It kind of dovetails, this activity dovetails with Ed Hove's discussion just before the break about acquiring data in the ground temperature for analysis. The GNWT began ground temperature monitoring sort of by coercion, if you will. The first thermal siphon foundation building in NWT was for the Inuvik Hospital, and at that time it was required that we monitor the ground temperatures just to monitor the activity of the foundations and the thermal siphons. So every subsequent installation of a thermal siphon foundation in the GNWT, most of them in Inuvik, was accompanied by ground temperature monitoring. So we have most of our sites where ground temperature is being monitored in the far north. The most southern point would be in Toledo, which, as you can see, is in the extensive discontinuous permafrost region. The next ground temperature monitoring site was in, or is in, Fort Good Hope at the Chief Tselday School, and then the remainder of the ground temperature monitoring thermosiphon, or thermistors, I should say, are in Inuvik. There's a number there. I sort of take issue with the way this map describes extensive discontinuous, because as anyone knows, the Mackenzie River is warming, and I would believe that that discontinuous would follow the Mackenzie River as it seems to do here, but even farther north than shown on the map. These are our sites where we're monitoring the ground temperature to date, and the temperature is monitored each week. The thermistors in the ground vary with the size of the building, of course, but the thermistors are buried into the ground at depth, and each of the thermistors records temperatures and sends that record to a logger. There are 8 sites. Western Arctic Research Center is not being monitored by the GNWT. They're monitoring their own data. Strangely enough, we will likely combine the data with them at some point in the future, but we've been doing this for 11 years now. This is the Arctic Tern in Inuvik, where we have installed thermosiphons as foundation support, and the thermistors run underneath the building and to depth, about 5 meters, and record the temperature of the ground so that we can determine whether these thermosiphons, you're looking at the radiators here, whether or not the thermosiphons are actually cooling the ground. I believe thermosiphons were discussed yesterday, so I don't have to go into how they work, but this particular site is shown in distress at this point in time because some of the thermosiphons have failed due to running water that's flowing beneath the building and eroding the permafrost. This is the brand new school in construction phase, taken last year. This school is set up on piles as opposed to thermosiphon foundations, and the piles are quite deep. They're also in Inuvik. But thermistors were placed throughout the underside of this building as well, and we're recording the ground temperatures under the school to ensure that the ground temperatures remain stable, because these piles rely on the frozen ground for bearing. These are the piles underneath the school. The piles vary in depth, but they go down as far as 15 meters. The Inuvik Hospital was, as I mentioned earlier, one of the first thermal siphon foundations built in NWT. It was back in 2000. And the entire building is on a big block of ice that's kept frozen by thermosiphons. And these concrete pads support the floor. It's a one-story building, and these pads can be adjusted by this kind of jack system. And they maintain the adjustments continually throughout the year to make sure that the floor of the hospital is level. This is one of the more southern locations where we're monitoring temperature along the Mackenzie Valley, or River Valley. And the Fort Good Hope School was completed a couple years ago. This is also just pile foundations. And these piles are being monitored because what happened at completion of construction was a skirt was added all the way around the bottom of the school. And designers were afraid that the heat of the building would radiate into the crawl space below and warm the ground and thus erode the ice under the ground. So the monitoring provides an indication as to the temperature of the ground, and if it does get too warm, there are louvers along the skirt that they can be opened up and air is allowed to flow through, thus cooling the ground. Toledo is the most southern of our monitoring installations. This photograph is before the building is in existence, of course, and we're looking at the drainage pits and the utilities. But as you can see, this one's also on thermosiphons, and the thermosiphons are essentially keeping the ground frozen and supporting the building itself. The building itself is a slab, and it's sitting on top of the frozen ground. We've had issues with this particular building, the thermosiphons, once again, just mechanical failure, in so much as that when a loop, for example, if a loop attached to that radiator there stops functioning, then the ground will warm up, thaw, and we'll get structural faults in the building, which we've already noticed occurring in this particular school. Not that all thermosiphons don't work. There are instances where thermosiphons work very well, and when they do, you don't hear anything about them. We seem to only hear about the bad things. Work was discussed by Ed in his last talk also. The Western Arctic Research Center in Inuvik monitors their ground temperatures as well. They keep records of their own. We don't log their data. So we will, at some point in time in future, call the Western Arctic Research Center, say, can we have your data? We're going to add it to ours so we have a better complete picture, better picture of ground temperatures at least in Inuvik, where most of these facilities are located. The actual thermistors are just thermocouples that are buried in the ground, and it's just an electrical resistance that's generated by temperature. And the electrical resistance is then well, there's a formula, and it generates a temperature for that particular level in the ground. And this one happened to be on the bottom of a radiator, but they're generally buried. This is the data cable that goes to the thermistor here. The thermistors are all the thermistors that are buried into the ground go to this data logger where the information, this temperature information is held. Capacity varies with how much data it can retain, but we'll generally pull data off. The GNWT will pull data off about 2 or 3 times a year. And when we pull it off, these data loggers, which have, by the way, a modem, and we dial into them from a central location. This is the software that we're interfacing with the data loggers. It's called LoggerNet. Campbell Scientific in Edmonton sells this stuff. But for each site, we have a unique phone number, and we'll call it up and download the data from the data logger. And then once we have that data, it looks something like this in a graphical format, which shows you a reading every 7 days from, let's see, October 15th to, I think it's June. This one is for, this particular thermistor string is for the Inuvik Young Offenders Facility, and it's string number 4. And this is what we get in terms of temperature data spread over time. I apologize for the small print, but it's the only way I could get it on a slide. This column here is time. These columns here are various depths, so that would be 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters, 5 meters. And each of these blocks here would be a string, a thermistor string. And over time, we could see the differences in the temperature of the ground. And once it comes to Yellowknife from Inuvik, it's analyzed there, and we make a determination whether or not there's a problem with our ground temperatures. In this case, it would be with a thermosiphon foundation, which is critical to act upon when you see fluctuations that are extreme. Going forward, I'd say a lot of data is required. We're just scratching the surface at this point. What the GNWT is committed to date is to adapt these strategies of the 4 new CSA standards that CSA is currently working on. One, the thermosiphons, I think it's up for public review now. I don't know if anybody has downloaded it or looked at it yet. Community drainage is another one that is currently in the works. Permafrost protection, I don't know if that's out yet, but it's very close. And snow loading, which I believe Mark's going to speak to. What we plan to do, the GNWT plans to do with collecting data is to come down the Mackenzie River Basin, because it's probably obvious why we would come down the Mackenzie River Basin. The Mackenzie River is warming up. There's been a number of studies that indicate that this river is getting warmer each year. Because of that, it's having a dramatic effect on the permafrost along the Mackenzie River, where most of the settlements are. And because of the population that's spread along the river, this would be where we would find most of our infrastructure. So most of our assets are along that river. And we have planned to install where we can, especially with new installations, because it's much cheaper to install thermistors when construction's occurring as opposed to later, because you have to actually slant drill under your building and install your thermistors on an existing building, which is quite costly. For the thermistor installation, just to give you an idea of cost for these things, thermistor installation at Inuvik School, which was just completed last January, I believe we spent in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $80,000 there. So if you take it as a percentage of construction costs, it's very, very minimal, and it can be done easily when buildings are being constructed. That's about it for me. Thank you. Maybe that's
we have time for a few questions. If people have any, Ed, I got to apologize. I misread the title of your talk.
Yeah, it's monitoring. Yeah,
they do make the print a little too small here, don't they? And I'm also relieved that it wasn't about modeling. It's much easier for me to understand the monitoring stuff. So any questions of Ed? Guys were so good this morning. All right. Oh, Emery's got a question.
Oh, there is?
My question for you, Ed, is you talked about thermistor installation around the foundation of buildings or under the buildings. Can similar installations be used along different types of infrastructure, such as, well, I'll use highways, for example?
That's a good question. Currently, we're installing thermistors in Toledo at the Toledo tank farm, under the tank farm, because the tank farm is currently being built, so we're putting them there. And they have been used primarily for roads, and we're borrowing the technology, in fact, to use under buildings because of its applicability. So yeah, it's very effective in monitoring temperatures under roads and other infrastructure, bridges. They've been used a wide area of engineering projects.